Welcome back, folks. We're now going to play the latest instalment in the Name the Goalscorer feature. Very simple rules. We'll play a clip from a notable Celtic goal in history. All you need to do is name the goal in question and the name will be beeped out of the commentary. Before we play this week's clip though, let's reveal the answer from last week. Quick reminder, I think you all got it, but Scottish Premiership, Celtic 4, Rangers 0, 3rd of September 2022. Plenty of Ange ball going on at the time. The goal itself, James McGregor with a quick free kick, plays it to O'Reilly, an incredible pass, and who with the finish?
Jota with the finish, probably peak Ange ball. Probably just everything was clicking. Everyone knew where they needed to be. Everyone was just on it. Aye.
Yeah, iconic goal, iconic celebration, Paddy. Quick bit of chat on Jota. Obviously, things haven't worked out for him personally. He's went out to Saudi, barely kicked a ball out there. I don't know what's happening. There's talk about him signing for another club out there. I'd love to see him come back into Europe. You know, you do want to see, for the most part, you want to see your ex-players do well. And for the short time, for the 2 seasons at Celtic, he was a real hero, wasn't he?
He was. I think, we seen it when he left and Louis Palmer came in, and a tough jersey to fill, I think I think a lot of pressure was put onto Palmer with that. He was a great player, one of those ones that just very unique, comes along every so often, and you realise when he's gone, bloody hell, what a player he was for us. I'd like to see him back in Europe as well, because there's part of me that thinks, yeah, all right, you've went and you've got all that money, fair play to you. But there's also the Jota that I think will be saying, if I hung about in Europe and made a move to a bigger club than Celtic, I could be knocking on the door for the Portugal team as well. We'll be looking at the Euros there and thinking, right, I need to get myself back in there. But he's put himself in a bit of a position, sadly.
Not financially.
Well, no, he can't come home, cause it.
He was such a talent, such a special player, and I think everyone involved with Celtic wish him all the best for whatever happens next. Okay, let's get to this week's clip, Paddy. I will be amazed if you don't get this, so please try not to give it away for any of the listeners. We'll beep it out anyway, but it's a really iconic goal, and I think it means a lot to Paddy, this one.
Berisha, that's a terrible pass. Edward, can it get even better for Celtic? Here to win the game! Gone and done it! Head over heels in the Olympico!
Anything come to mind, James?
You want it, but it's
100%. So listen, we'll not get into it too much. It's just great commentary. It's a great one to enjoy from time to time. A huge night, Paddy, one that yourself and most of the guys enjoyed, apart from a certain Stevie Keenan. But we'll get to all of that next week. As always, we'll beep out the answer for this one. We'll reveal the answer in next week's show, and we'll also share the clips on socials for anyone who wants to have a go there. Just to round things off as we head towards the end of today's recording, ahead of the break, I asked, and if you know the history, and that's the name of the latest comedy play by Jim Orr, who's a good friend of us here at the Celtic Exchange. Jim featured in part 3 of our Battle to Save Celtic series. Folks who watched that will know that Jim was a founding member of the Save Our Celts campaign, a hugely important group for Celtic back in the early 90s. The play focuses on that time in Celtic history, some pretty dark times to be honest with you, late 80s, early 90s, before the Fergus McCann revolution kicked in. The play itself, that starts in around about 7 weeks' time. It takes place at Webster Theatre in the West End from the 10th to 12th of October, and a link for some more info to that in the show notes for this episode. Tickets are £20, James, but if you've not already picked yours up, we've got 2 to give away for the Friday night. That's the 11th of October at 7:30pm. We'll get to that in just a minute, but before we do so, I want to ask yourself and Paddy just a wee curveball question, slightly linked to this side of things from Jim's play. So, and if you know your history, as I mentioned, it centres on some pretty grim times for Celtic before it eventually all comes good for the club following the Fergus McCann takeover. But what's been your own grimmest time watching Celtic? Now, that can be a specific game, a moment, or perhaps a season or an era in Celtic history. So I'll come to you first, James.
I'm assuming we're just taking the 90s and putting them in a wee bag in the corner.
You can handpick some moments from the 90s, it's up to you.
No, probably the lowest I've felt. I was living down in London at the time. Went to watch the last game of the season against Motherwell, and
Black Sunday.
Watched it with a good friend of ours, Danny McGee, in the Cock Tavern, Euston, London #1. And at the end of the game, it's all over, and the way the kind of crowd was, and it was absolutely mobbed, and there was a lassie sitting behind us, funny enough, a guy I used to go to school with, and just then she kind of put her head down, dropped her pint all over me.
It never rains but it pours, Paddy.
Oh my God.
Get me up the road.
What a way to end it.
Even without the pint, that's probably as low as I felt, kind of thing, because there was so much hope getting into that, and it's all there for you. But yeah, that was a tough one.
What was that, 2005? Is that right? Give or take four-ish?
No, four.
Oh, we'll need to check that.
We'll find that out.
Scott McDonald, obviously, scoring the goal. Did you ever forgive him?
Never fully.
Do you know, I think there was some folk, he did a good job for Celtic, scored some big goals,
Yeah.
scored against AC Milan and all that stuff, but I think maybe some folks in this room just couldn't quite forgive. Paddy, what about yourself? Any low moments for you?
Two.
Oof.
Well, I think one for me was the Mowbray season. I think that was a tough one to watch. I remember thinking we were nowhere near it. We weren't even competing. I just felt that we looked weak across the team, and I still to this day I think back to a lot of people saying about who's the best loan signing and who had the biggest impact, and a lot of people still give Robbie Keane like a lot of adulation.
Can I guess who you're going to say?
Well, it's Ida.
Or else I was going to say somebody for the Tony Mowbray era.
All right, no. But I think for Robbie Keane, I think, you know, like there was some big games in that test as well, and he didn't show up for me.
Yeah.
We were really poor under Mowbray, and I've so much love for that guy as well. You know, I think he loved playing for this club, and I just think it was a really difficult time. The light of the tunnel was Lennon coming in, and Lennon really having a bit of an impact at the end of the season, beating Rangers 2-1. I remember that game well, and I think, you know, we were kind of hoping that we would kick on for there, but that was a tough one. That was a tough one for me.
Just quickly on Tony Mowbray, I really like him as well. I think he's a very likeable guy, credited with creating the huddle at Celtic, which in itself is huge for the club now, but a real heart on sleeve kind of player. He'll accept that he was limited as a player, but he gave his heart and soul every time he wore the shirt. And I believe he's come back from a spell of illness. I think it was announced, is it Middlesbrough he takes now? I can't quite remember. Yeah. Whoever he's coaching anyway, he was announced onto the park and he said he's endured the toughest few months of his life, and he thanks everyone for the support. And I think there's a lot of love for Tony Mowbray from Celtic. It didn't work out as a manager, but that's football, Paddy. That's how these things go. In terms of your loan signings, I thought you were going to mention Diomansi Kamara. I thought was a decent,
Kamara was all right,
front man for Celtic. But anyway, you said there was two moments. It was the other one when that guy started telling the story about AstroTurf and where it was from, or is it?
Or
that
the fact that Celtic
it?
are going to win the Champions League by taking steroids.
Yeah. Those two aside, anything else?
The other one is one we don't really like to talk about, but Seville was a tough one. I think that for the joy that it brought us all, being so close to going and being witness to that, and watching your team go and winning a European trophy, and I think it's more down to the fact that the occasion that was made by the Celtic fans and the build up to it, and how difficult it is to do, how difficult it is to get there. It's always been a tough one, and I remember hearing an interview not long after it, Larson saying I'll never watch it again. But I watched his interview with Chris Sutton, and he says I've watched it back now, and I'm like, don't do that to yourself, Henrik. You've done enough for us that day. It was a tough one.
I've never watched it back.
Same, never.
I have.
I don't know, that I don't see the fun in it.
On you go.
Well, just see in terms of like the reason I didn't pick that is because, you know, obviously defeat's a defeat, and we were so close to winning it and all these things. But what Seville was really for me was a deletion of the 90s, you know, like a full reset. You know, you're back and you're on top, and it's going to be all right. You know.
No, that's fair. And I think what we forget is that Porto team went and won the Champions League the next season, but we put them to it. We put them to the test. I think when we get the second equaliser, I thought we're going to win this. But they were a very, very good team as well. They were
really good side. Not that anyone's interested, Paddy, but I've also got a couple of low moments. Nobody ever asked me, but I'll ask myself.
The loneliness of the host.
That's it. But I'd scribbled down Seville and described it as a bittersweet moment. I'll always remember coming out the stadium and seeing some folks I know, some folks from school who you hadn't seen for a few years at that point, and you were just like, all right. You just kind of stumbled on. It was such a strange moment. There was a lot of pride around what Celtic had achieved. The run itself was phenomenal, and beating Liverpool and Blackburn and Celtic Vigo, all the fun that you had getting there, and it was just so near yet so far. But there's a lot to be proud about in terms of Seville. The other time in general, and I suppose this maybe applies to all football fans, obviously the COVID season wasn't much fun for Celtic, but just a cliched quote and all that stuff, but football without fans isn't really football. When you were either watching, you know, from home when you couldn't get to the stadium, and you're watching these soulless, almost friendly matches getting played out in echoey stadiums, and you could hear all the players shouting, it just wasn't football for me. And even when you get back to like kind of part stadiums at Celtic and stuff, it was still a bit strange. You cannot beat a full Celtic Park. And any fan of any club, I'm sure, would say that's when football's at its best. So that was obviously some tough times in general. So some good answers across the board.
What you're saying is titles don't count if you didn't see your team win it.
You can read between those lines, James, but that's exactly what I'm saying. Anyway, so to get back to it, and it's not to make out that Jim's plays a downer. Jim's plays obviously very funny, as is Jim. So it's Anna, if you know the history. To win those 2 tickets, or to be in with a chance of winning them, you just have to answer one simple question from that era in Celtic's history, and we'll pick a winner at random during next week's show. Send your answers in to us on Twitter at Celtic Exchange using the hashtag Celtic History. Question is, and I'll ask you guys, and we can beep out if you know the answer, I think you might. During the late 90s, 27th of September 1989 to be precise, Celtic beat Partizan Belgrade 5-4 at Celtic Park in a Cup Winners' Cup tie. Were you at it?
I was at the youth club. Listened to it on the radio.
At the youthy, okay. But still managed to go out on the away goals rule, and that maybe sums up how things were going at the time, Paddy. Good at times, not so good at others, and just couldn't catch a break. Polish striker Jackie Jakanowski famously scored 4 of Celtic's goals on the night, but who scored our 5th goal? Any ideas?
We covered this not that long ago.
Give it the year again.
September 1989. So I'll give you a go each, and I can beep it out regardless.
Dovchik?
No, Polish left back. Wasn't him.
Joe Miller?
Not Joe Miller either, so no beeping out required, but a well-known Celtic striker is what I'll say. So if you do have the answer, send it to us on Twitter at Celtic Exchange using the hashtag Celtic History. And remember, that's and if you know the history, Jim Orr's play, which comes to the Webster's Theatre in October. On you go.
Just on that game, as a very young youth, I had a terrible interpretation of what the away goals in Europe meant. Somebody told me they meant double. I was like, 8-5, guys, cool. Is that away?
We're good to go. Yes, I'll get that beeped out for you, Paddy. Well done. As we start to close out, just a couple of bits of business. Don't think we caught it last week, but Kwon is now away to Hibs on loan. Decent move for him. I think it's something Celtic should do more of. Loan out your fringe players. If you're not going to get them sold and off the books, put them to Aberdeen's and Hibs and
La Liga next season for him.
You think so? Taking Europe by storm.
If you look at guys like Home and get guys who have got talent and haven't quite delivered for us yet, could they almost transform a Dundee, a Hibs, and Aberdeen and make them much stronger? Give them game time.
I absolutely think that might be happening with Home. I've just got a feeling they'll maybe wait and see how the rest of the window goes, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's a deal lined up.
Home, Iwata, Kobayashi, Lagerbielka, these guys, if they can't get a permanent move, that should be in the thinking for all concerned.